Hello and welcome to another Industry Week 2022 event for games. This is the entrepreneurship panel. I'm pleased to welcome John Stollard from Warlord Games and James and Paul from Stone Sword Games. Just a reminder to everybody that there are, even though it's Friday, still a few events left for us in games. We've got Gamer later on today, which is always a fun event in the evening. We've also got the Games Jam, which is just finishing off as this session is going on. I think they're going to be judging between 10 and 12, so hopefully announcing the winners of that just after dinner time, I would imagine. And I think there are some other events going on in the afternoon as well that you might be interested in. And also a reminder as well, if you haven't already, go through your photographs on your phones and use the hashtag IW22 and upload to social media, and you can win prizes from us, but you, the students, get to vote basically for the best picture from Industry Week. So I assume that there'll be a top 5 or something like that you have to vote for. So yeah, do get involved in that as well. Just a reminder to the people in the room that if there is a fire, we'll be proceeding through the fire exits in the building. I have to do that just to let you know for health and safety reasons. So yeah, follow the staff members and we'll get you out of the building if the fire alarm goes off. Okay, brilliant. So without further ado, let's get cracking on this panel talk. It's an informal panel talk. We encourage questions as well, so if you've got any questions, do please put them in the Q&A section. Is there a Q&A section today? Yeah, there is. Brilliant. Cool. So whack it in online. I know that a lot of you are watching online. We've got a few people in the room as well, and again, if you've got any questions, do feel free to ask them at the end. We'll leave a slot for that. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to get the guests to introduce themselves first of all, and then what we'll do is we'll go back around the guests and just get them to talk about their time in the industry and what they've done. So if you can just introduce yourselves and who you work for at the moment, and then we'll go back and talk about where you've come from effectively. Yeah.
Hi folks, I'm John Stollard, CEO of Warlord Games based in Nottingham.
Hi, I'm Paul Allen. I'm co-owner with James, he'll introduce himself as well, of Stone Sword Games, also in Nottingham.
Hi, I'm James, same story with Paul.
Excellent. Okay, maybe if we go with Paul first, and then James and then John, in terms of background in the industry and how you've kind of got to this point where you are now entrepreneurs, I suppose. Yeah.
Blimey. Some of you may know me. I'm kind of quite closely connected to Confetti. I used to teach here. My love of games, the industry, my career kind of came from passion, really, more than anything else. I designed my own Kickstarter solely by myself, funded by myself, designed by myself, that funded back in 2016, 17 maybe. Moderate success, but after the Kickstarter campaign, after crowdfunding, there was a big kind of like problem of not knowing anything else after that. And then that kind of opened up a door later on where I met James. We met through a mutual friend, designing games, and you've kind of filled in the gap of my knowledge. And from that, we've designed Stone Sword Games. We've had 3 games out. Yeah, with one last year, did exceedingly well. We broke the $1 million mark. And the £1 million mark as well, which put us in one of only 200 games on Kickstarter, 200 products on Kickstarter ever to have done that. And then we've kind of transformed ourselves from working in our front rooms to owning an office, a company, and staff members within 2-3 months.
We're adults now.
Big boys, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm James. My background was I was a financial advisor. Don't want to be a financial advisor. But I was a long-term nerd. I grew up basically playing rugby and then sneaking around the bins to go to Games Workshop after school and painting like Eldar figures, and it just kind of never went away. I always suffered at school and at university from, basically I've always been ADHD, and it meant that everything I tried to do failed, but I always went back to my roots, which was gaming. It was the nerd culture. And then I met Paul in a pub, as I meet every good person in a pub, it seems, and we started designing a game together through a mutual friend, and yeah, then it came out like, Paul, you already have a game, what's happening with that? And basically I applied what I'd learned being a financial advisor and just the business sense, and together we just made this like yin-yang pair, and we've kind of propelled forward since then. Both sharing in the love of game design and nerd culture, but bringing 2 completely different sets of skills to the business. And it's been a bit of a ride, really. A good one.
Over to John.
Yeah, I had a love of model soldiers all my life, from the dreaded Airfix kits when I was 6. I went to college to do a degree in psychology and spectacularly managed to fail it, which I don't think anybody else did. And so, having wasted an expensive education, I wrote to Citadel Miniatures, as they were then, in Newark, and got a job with Citadel, which of course became Games Workshop. I was there for 24 years, and Games Workshop are a splendid company, and they teach you an awful lot about business and how to become commercial. I was the sales director for a number of years, and then 14 years ago I was made redundant, and so I thought, what am I going to do? I thought, all I've done in my life is toy soldiers, and I thought, oh, I'll set up a toy soldier company. So I set up Warlord Games 14 years ago, with the ex-editor of White Dwarf, Paul Sawyer. And we thought we'd do historicals, which is my first love, rather than, I do like fantasy and science fiction, of course, but so we made some Romans, and that was 14 years ago, and we're now, we're a stone's throw from Games Workshop, if you want to come and visit us, and we employ 105 people now, and I'm still thoroughly enjoying going to work. So that's me.
Brilliant, thanks, John. That's great. And I think the thing that kind of connects everybody here is this idea of entrepreneurship, and I know that's certainly something that Paul and James are driven by as sort of relative newcomers to the scene. And I know John taking that step, leaving Games Workshop after you've been made redundant and started a new business. How was that when you started Warlord Games? Can you take us through that period, really, and when you started up? I think you talked a little bit about it just before we started up.
Yeah, I'd always wanted to do historical miniatures, but when I was working for Games Workshop, they wouldn't allow that. I can see how they wouldn't. So I've been planning a box set of Romans, because everybody loves a Roman. And so I've sort of been working on that in the background. Perhaps in my mind I was always going to move on, but so when I was made redundant, I thought, right, let's get this plastic box set out. And the tooling was £24,000 to make one box of Romans, which is an awful lot of money. So I put in my redundancy money, basically. It was £5,000 to get the models sculpted by the wonderful Bob Naismith, talented designer. Then there's artwork, and there's this, that, and the other, and everything else. And so it was about £34,000 to get my first box set out, which was a staggering amount of money 14 years ago, I can tell you. But I thought, well, let's have faith. You know, they are great models, and I say I don't know how many plastic sets we've got out now, an awful lot. But it did take a big leap of faith, I have to say. I've never written a check for that much money before in my life. Didn't quite know how many noughts went on it, because you just don't. Well, you know, when you just don't write checks for that amount. So. But it's very satisfying, and we're still selling those Romans now. They're still excellent models, but yeah, it is scary setting up on your own. There's no doubt about that. But what I did do is I put all my learning from Games Workshop into it. I think, how do I make this work? How do I make it an attractive product? How do I price it correctly to get my money back? And on what scale? When will I get my money back? When will it pay a return? But I will say, never been happier in my life than working for myself. Much as I love working at Workshop, once you're working for yourself, you'll never want to work for anybody else ever again, I can tell you.
So yeah, it's really, really good advice. In terms of the vision at that point, when you started, did you have an idea of where Warlord Games was going to go, or was it really just sort of like a punt, you know, a gamble almost at that point?
I could pretend I've worked everything out perfectly, and it's a master plan, but I would be fibbing. I thought, it was a punt. Let's make some plastic Romans and see what happens.
Yeah.
I never intended to deal with 750 trade accounts, which I do now. It was meant to be a mail order business. And I never meant to have a factory, but now I've got a blooming great factory. Yeah. So it just kind of came about.
So over to you as well now then, James and Paul. You took that leap as well. Paul left Confetti. That
twice,
was his leap.
yeah.
Twice. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember you had a T-shirt that said,
Yeah.
when you went to Spiel in Germany, you had a T-shirt that said, I left my lecturing job to do this or something.
Yeah, it was literally the day after I quit.
Yeah.
I went to Germany to make money and make games, Well, similar stuff. I think we spoke, obviously, this morning about stuff, but it's that motivation. It's always a risk, but we were never not going to do it.
Yeah, I think.
And
yeah.
I've been knocked back. But again, it's Thierry Henry. You either win or you learn. And it's the idea that if you succeed straight away, you don't know how you succeeded. Whereas now I know how we succeeded because I'd failed. I know what was wrong, so now we don't do that. And that was kind of like, and we've learned so many things. I mean, there's still things we don't know, obviously. But there's so many things we do know. And we know right now there's a magic formula with crowdfunding and a certain thing that if this all went to pot, I know I can do it again. Like, I know that formula, so I'm happy with that. And now we're learning other bits, bigger bits, more stuff, which is really good. Yeah.
I think from like the other side of the coin as well, from looking at like the negatives to positives, I think when I found Paul, we realised we were kind of kindred spirits in that we were never going to be able to do 9 to 5s. And I think there's going to be a lot of artists and designers listening to this now who have already worked 9 to 5s and they've realised they're kind of the same thing. And listen to that instinct, because there's a lot of adults who go into the world and they will fight that instinct for their entire lives and then look back on retirement and go, oh, well, shit, I should have maybe taken a few punts. I wake up at 4 a.m. sometimes with game design ideas, and so does Paul, and we'll message each other at random times, and we'll have new ideas. Our artist comes and works on Sunday. He does work comes and does art on Sundays, but he might clock off at like 3 o'clock on a work day, and that's something this industry can do for you, and actually improve how you work rather than any other industry. We basically had this conclusion, and it was never said, but 9 to 5s were killing us, and I think this now ability to be your own bosses, and it's also about like the responsibility of being your own boss. Like when you work a 9 to 5, you can blame other people for your performance. You can blame other factors. But essentially, Paul and I now know that the entire weight of our success is on our shoulders. But that's a really inspiring thing to actually have, because you're empowered, because you know that anything you do that goes well, it's because of your hard work, your effort, maybe a bit of luck, but it's on you. So. Yeah,
and I think it's also that idea that you're looking after your staff. I know, obviously you're at the start now. You've got staff. It's great. It's very exciting. You've just got your new offices. That's very good. John's got lots of staff, and I know from being in Warlord that culture and that community of Warlord Games is really important. So I suppose it's really about instilling that in the people that you work with.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, different ways of working suit different people, and the ability, so entrepreneurs and people who call themselves entrepreneurs or are called entrepreneurs, I think part of that is having a skill to know how to get the best out of the people that work for you. And you're a big family, like, you've got to love the people who work for you, and they've got to love you back in terms of like respect and what's expected. So we know that, for example, some of our staff love the 9 to 5 and it suits them. They love being able to come in at 9 a.m, their day starts, they clock out at 5, their day ends. And that's how they get their work balance. But then we also have to know, we know from going through it ourselves, that if a staff member works better, like with less of a, like that constraint, then we let them do that. And that's absolutely wonderful now, because we've both had 9 to 5s that haven't worked for us. And they haven't worked for us for these reasons. And we've been able to now say to our staff, look, like, we're not going to turn around and be hypocrites on that. Like, we know the system, and we know how the system like does or doesn't work for you. So let's do that. And that's why we're doing so well.
There's an understated rule that no one really understands, or everyone understands but never applies, is you need to be happy. If you're not happy, you're not going to work. If someone tells you what to do and you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it as well as you could. If someone goes, hey, what do you want to do? I want to do that thing. Cool, me too. They're going to work on it, and they'll work as a boss now. They're going to work longer and harder on something that you're paying a smaller amount for because they want to do it, but it suits you as well. So if you're all on the same page, you're going to get more out of that person, but they're happy. And we work like dogs. So again, before we had our massive success, we were probably on minimum wage because we're running off a bit of a campaign that we'd done, but we're working 70-hour weeks. if we didn't love that, you'd count the pennies, you'd count that hourly wage. We never counted it, and you shouldn't if you love it. It's the kind of a weird balance of the work ethic. Everyone's obsessed with counting how much they're worth, and it's like, but if you're doing something you love, you don't count it. You don't count the hours. I think that's something really important as a mantra.
Is that the same for you, John, as well? In your, I know we were talking earlier on about how much you love working in the industry, and you wake up every morning and want to go to work. Is that something that is fed down to the rest of the staff at Warlord as well, do you think?
Well, same as these lads, when you set up on your own, you work all the hours you can. Now, I've got 105 staff, so I don't have to work as hard as I used to, because if I do a 40-hour week, I run out of things to do, because hopefully my 104 other members of staff are doing what they do and doing it well. And if I go in there for 40 hours a week, I'd be standing behind them, looking over them, and that's the last thing you want to do as a boss.
Making them feel uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, it would be dreadful, so I don't interfere. So I've now worked out my life balance, because I'm 60 now. So I go into work at 11, and I come home at 3:30. So I have my meetings, my direct, whatever meetings you have and stuff. But I certainly don't stand over them or second guessing what they're doing, because they're better at what they do than me.
That's why they're there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I've certainly paid my dues over the years. But I'm slowing down a bit at 60.
Yeah.
But because I trust them and to get on with it.
Do you still get excited about things that you're doing as well at Warlord? Obviously, you're driving a lot of the creative vision, presumably, for Warlord.
Oh, I get terribly excited about projects, yeah. And I have a great studio, a really good studio, but studios in themselves aren't necessarily always creative, funnily enough, because you have to have people who do things. And that's terribly important, because in the gaming industry, funnily enough, ideas are, I don't want to decry it, but there can be 10 a penny. Yeah. Everybody's got ideas, and that's great. But is it going to be commercial? Yeah. Are people going to like it? Can you make it? Can you deliver it on time? Have you got the margins? All these boring things like, how do you make these models? What do you use resin? Do you use metal? Do you do this, that, and the other? Am I bringing it in from China? A lot of them are very mundane decisions, really. There's a lot, particularly if you're running a factory. A lot of it's very mundane and by rote. But suddenly, being the boss, you can have a passion for something. We decided to do a Waterloo game the other day in epic scale, and that was driven by me. It's one of my childhood dreams to make this huge game with all these model soldiers, and so I was able to push that one through. Sometimes you play the boss card. It's like, we're just going to do it because I think it's going to be great, and it's what I've always wanted to do. So there, you don't do it often because you're just going to make people fed up. But occasionally, it's my train set, and I get to play with it just occasionally, and that keeps me excited.
That's the power of being the boss, you see. Yeah, absolutely. I'm like that in games, because that's why we're doing all the stuff about tabletop gaming, because it's my passion, and I've kind of forced it on everybody. But I know a lot of the students love tabletop as well, so I think it's worked really well.
As well? But people feed off that.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you love it, people see that love and go, "Oh, I'm on board with this. I see what you're saying." And I didn't think about Waterloo until you mentioned how excited you are. Now I want to make it with you, and I think that kind of pushes stuff, because again, there is hundreds of ideas. You spend all day just picking and going through them, but if someone drives it with a passion, trust that passion as well. I think it's really important.
From a financial point of view as well, like tabletop games and board games and card games more specifically are going through a renaissance at the moment, and that renaissance has been lasting a few years, and that bubble is not going to pop anytime soon. So you guys, being games testers, games designers, artists, you will be able to build your careers in this industry. There is room for that at the moment. You have to be talented and work hard, of course, but it's not like we're not picking something very obscure to fix on anymore. Like, this isn't 20 years ago. Like this is now $1 billion industry, and you can have a piece of that pie.
It was in the New York Times last year. It was the top 3rd global trend was tabletop games in crowdfunding. That's how cryptocurrency was one, and then tabletop. And you look at that and go, okay, we're in something special here. And again, with Dan, yourself, beautifully pushing this in Confetti in Nottingham. If you look at what Nottingham is, obviously with the Sid I mentioned, Games Workshop, it's the mecca, it's the heart of tabletop games potentially in the world, and yeah, we're kind of part of the third biggest global trend at the minute. So, hence making we made £1 million in our front rooms. How? It's the place to be and the thing we're doing. We kind of know that because we've been doing it for a little while now. So yeah, it's
we 2 years. We've now sold our latest game. We sold 40,000 copies, and we're not geniuses. We're not particularly like wealthy or even talented. Like it's something that you guys can all do very quickly if you just do what Paul said, like work like dogs, really.
Do you think it's important to have that that sort of mix? Like, I think it's interesting, the dynamic between you guys, where you've got the creative person in Paul and the sensible person in James.
Like working at Games Workshop, you learnt those things that you just brought to the table. So I don't have to work 15 years to know that. Well, so you've added that 15 years of knowledge straight into kind of our set.
Well, I'll ask John something now, and I imagine the answer is going to be yes, but. When you left Games Workshop with redundancy, I imagine in your head you already had your golden team of like, I want this guy on that, I want that guy on that, I want that name on that, because you'd seen these people in the same working environment. I imagine like you ported quite a few of them over. I mean, you had Sawyer, like the famous fat bloke from White Dwarf, obviously like very famous in the industry. But were there other people as well, maybe in less well-known parts of the business that you had your eye on when you left?
Yeah, absolutely. Is Games Workshop a fine employer, I would say, but they occasionally have pogroms where they shed some skin, shall we say, and quite a few people go on the transfer list, and I'm well placed, literally being 300 yards away, to find the guys and girls who I always admired and thought they're great and they fit into my little company really well. So yeah, no. Rick Priestley is a very good example. Paul Sawyer, as you say, and an awful lot of the casters, because Games Workshop have got rid of pretty much all of their metal casting now. So we've got quite a few mold makers and casters who fit in just nicely. Yeah.
And do you think that's as well because the sort of ethos of Warlord is very much like that old Games Workshop style? Because there was a period, up until you left, I suppose, slightly beyond that, things changed, didn't they, a little bit in terms of how Games Workshop became more corporate, became less of a sort of, like a standard games company and definitely more of a corporate thing. Do you think a lot of those people have left to join Warlord because you're more like the old style Games Workshop?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Games Workshop is an extraordinary machine at the moment. Just truly, it's quite astonishing what they're doing. But they're absolutely a different company to the one I remember. But they're doing very well, so they must be doing something right, that's for sure. Their models are simply stunning at the moment. I think they've got 40 designers now, 40 model soldier designers, which is an awful lot of people doing this thing. And they've got 50 in their marketing department, I think, 50 people. Yeah. So that's a lot of talent there. Yeah. But yeah, no, quite a few people have joined us to get a bit more of a family feel. Yeah. But which we try and encourage, of course. But yeah.
And I think as well, we shouldn't downplay the role that Games Workshop has had in all of this in Nottingham. We're in a lucky position to be in Nottingham with all this great games heritage. So many people have come through Games Workshop and started their own businesses afterwards. So I think it's really tied into that entrepreneurial thing.
I think it's like really obvious as well, like because basically what happens is Games Workshop is the aim for so many people. You grow up playing Warhammer, you go, I'm gonna work for Games Workshop. You move your family, like you go to get a job. You meet a girl, you meet a guy, you meet your partner. In Nottingham, you get together, you have a kid, you get a dog, you buy a house. You leave Games Workshop, you're not going to then upstick everything again. So you get this kind of like apple falls out the tree effect, where like Foundry, you've got like Ian and Brian Ansell like live up the road, and you've got like North Star as well. You got Warlord, you've got Mantic, you got like all these huge all the companies are in Nottingham. So you are, as people listening to this, you are in the perfect place, like the perfect place to work in this industry. You could not go better if you tried.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really important for the students to understand that, because it is a city full of opportunity at the moment for everybody, and all you've got to do is stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, my favourite, I say this all the time, it's in a quoted so many times, but it's so important to know. I went to New York a few years ago, and I was looking for a board game cafe. At the time, there was 3 in Nottingham. I think there's 4 or 5 now. I was in New York State, and there's 1, and it's open 3 days a week. So there's more board game cafes in Nottingham than the whole of New York State. That was a few years ago.
There's also
and
have you heard the Nottingham joke as well? Do you remember Nottingham joke of there's a joke kind of in the industry, which is if you go anywhere else in the country and you sit down at a pub or restaurant and you go, I'm a games designer, everyone goes, oh wow, that's amazing. Like people come and mob you. If you do it in Nottingham, then someone from the next table goes, so what? Because everyone,
Yeah, or so am I. Yeah, excellent. So in terms of games design, let's talk a little bit about that aspect of things. So I think because we've got an interesting mix at Confetti of students that are into games design and then also games art. It's the 2 courses drive both of those things. So which do you think is most important? Is one of them more important than the other? Do you think a design aesthetic sells the game, or do you think the gameplay sells the games?
That's a really tough question, and contentious as well. Like,
I'll go first,
I don't want to make anyone sad, but
it needs to look good. First of all,
it always needs to look good.
There's a standard. If you look at games that were made about 2014, which is what 6, 7, 8 years ago,
even viticulture,
they look like they're made from the 80s. The artwork, the amount of artwork, and kind of the feel of a game just rocketed.
Yeah.
There's a few companies that have kind of been Games Workshop and Warlord and
Cool
Mini or Not.
Yeah.
They really pushed that. They've got like the greatest artists. I kid you not, the greatest artists that ever have been doing artwork on board games. That's what's happened. So I say artwork is arguably more important to sell it.
Yeah, correct.
But to keep the thing going is games design.
You can bring out a broken game with beautiful art and make a load of money, but you only make that money once.
Exploding Kittens
goes,
kind of vibes.
Hang on, these guys don't know what they're doing. Well, if you you can bring out a brilliant, mechanically great game with crap art, and you'll sell none, and then people play it and go, wait a minute, how do I buy this? You're at a crossroads at that point. You're either out of print because you didn't make enough money, which is on you for not getting better art, or like someone comes along and goes, hang on, can we get that game back to print? And this happened very recently with a game called Arc Nova. The art on Arc Nova is okay. Like the art on Arc Nova is okay. You build a zoo. It's very it's beautiful. It's very zeitgeist. It looks at environmentalism and ecology. It's very fashionable. The in-game mechanics, is it photos or it's like some filtered photos or something like that?
What's it called? Not Snapseed. Yeah, it's basically they've gone through Shutterstock.
Yeah.
It's Shutterstock artwork.
So they bought like generic pieces. They bought like basically stock images of animals and put them onto the game. Now this game is absolutely smashing reviews, and it's out of print everywhere. So like you can go on eBay and there'll be a copy on eBay now for like 200, 300 quid. But that shows you that you don't have to have the best art to also be a success. It's kind of how you position yourself in the market and how you hit that market. If you only need one sale and then you're off to the next product, you can produce a game that's not balanced or broken. But the art then will need to sell it. And if you can afford to wait a long time, then mechanics can be great and art doesn't have to be that good.
What's John's take on that? Because John, I know what the slight difference between the 2 companies. You're sort of more into the sort of one game, then move on to another game, whereas John's Warlord thing is very much like bolt action is there.
I think our biggest division is the subcategory of tabletop, which is we are firmly like board games, maybe a little dabbling in war games, while Warlord is mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but it's war games with a dabbling of board games. Like they've got board games in their range, but the bread and butter is like World War II and Ancients kind of war gaming, and they're very different, philosophies, I guess, with how you sell that product and how you package that product.
Largely what these 2 guys said, I'd agree, because they're absolutely bang on there. It's a funny thing, gaming, isn't it? If you, let's take Games Workshop as an example. They bring out a new edition of a game. I've even seen people pouring petrol on their models and burning them because they've changed the rules. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's Bretonians spread a candle on my fancy.
Actually setting them on fire, saying, "Take that, Games Workshop, you swines! Look what you've done to me. You've changed the rules."
I just cried on mine and said.
You're making me destroy my own property.
And he was American. edit that bit out. And you think, well, what an interesting response. It's obviously madness. And you think, you want to write to them and say, well, you don't have to buy the next version of the game. If you're playing version 3 and they bought out version 4, well, carry on playing version 3. What's wrong with you? The lawyers aren't going to come around and make you play number 4, are they?
It's not compulsory.
It's very strange. It's this wonderful love-hate thing that we have with the people, the games that we love, but they love it so much that they pour petrol on their models, and it's just very strange. Just play the game that you got, the one that you like, because games do change and develop, but it's just a very funny thing.
It is a strange one, that, and it is really only in tabletop, I think, isn't it? It's because what is interesting though,
video games and animation has the same thing. I think people get very attached to anime, like in the same level, and you can kind of see the same dichotomy. Like Cowboy Bebop, the live adaptation is a fantastic example of that. That was always going to fail. Because the problem is that Cowboy Bebop, I think 32 episodes, 1 season, like it was an art. It's art. Like when it came out, it did so many things new, but then it had such a cult following and its passion. It's like, oh, they're building a new shop down the road. It's a co-op. No, it's Sainsbury's. Who cares? Because even though it's on your back doorstep, like that is your land. That is, you live there, but you don't care that much. But passions like board games and wargaming, they're brought into their home. Like we physically choose to bring that product into our home and into our heart space, and because of that, like we put a lot of emphasis onto it. So when they change an edition of a game and they don't like it, the response isn't logical. It's based entirely off passion.
It's a hobbyist industry that makes a lot of money in a way. So it's like it's a hobby. So it's your thing. It's more personal than perhaps a AAA game that you've just a FIFA. Like I bought FIFA, cool. Next FIFA, buy the next one, don't care. Whereas this is they've painted the miniatures. They've given them names and feelings and characters. It's almost like role play.
They stuck their fingers together with super glue and then screamed as they had to prise them apart.
They dropped it and broke it and screamed and cried. And then then it's like we don't play with them anymore.
Yeah, I do remember that. If you play, I don't know, Call of Duty or whatever it was on you might say to your mate, "Can I borrow your game?" And if you never gave it back, he would say, "Yeah, all right, doesn't matter." But if you borrowed your Warhammer army or a Warlord game army, if you borrowed it and didn't give it back, he'd go and burn your house down.
Do you remember the Metal Thunderhawk? Oh, sorry, I left your Metal Thunderhawk on my car and drove off.
Exactly. Well, that would be it. They would no longer be a mate, would they?
They'd be off the Christmas card
list. They'd be dead.
list.
They'd be under the patio.
Oh, the passion that you put into making those models and building that army and doing all that stuff, it's so much more than a computer game, which much as they're wonderful, computer games, don't get me wrong, but it's... you'd fall out with somebody very easily.
I think there's something also about how games can be broken. We always look forward to new editions, and once a game has been broken, it can never be fixed. So Magic, think about people playing Magic the Gathering in board game cafes like Dice Cup, Luderati. They're there every weekend. They've got one group of friends, and that group of friends coalesces perfectly over Magic. Like, they don't want to play Pokemon, they don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh, they want to play Magic. So if Magic then brought out a new edition, which completely screwed the pooch, and it just ruined Magic, then their friendship group's gone. What they do every weekend is gone. So we do have to wear this hat, almost like we are like vicars in board game design. We are preaching to a crowd here, and we have to make sure we get that right, because we can bring out Senjutsu and it could be a broken mess, but we've put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into making sure it's not, because we need to care as much as people are going to care. But we need to make sure that when people go to the cafe at the weekend to play Senjutsu, that we're not disrespecting them by ruining our own game.
Yeah, and I think it's also about understanding that there are going to be obsessive people out there that will try and pick holes in whatever you do.
Person. Yeah. I'm that person. I left in our first rule book, there was a comma in the wrong place. I took all 2,000 copies out of the and I've changed it, because it pissed me off. And so I think, if you're one of those people in the crowd, you might have a terrible time if you're going to try being an accountant. But if you work in games and you generally have a passion for games, it can love you back, because there are a lot of customers in this market who are the same type of person. So it's a superpower in this industry. It's a weakness in a lot of others. So
definitely, yeah. So thinking about the way you are approaching the games that are being made for you, how big is the idea of community for you as people? It kind of links into what we've been talking about there a little bit. So I know for John, certainly back in the old days of Games Workshop, those Games Workshop open days were always an amazing thing. And I know you do a similar thing with Warlord because the students went on to one of the open days recently. How important is that kind of stuff to build your business as an entrepreneur?
Oh, well, it is all about community. It's difficult to say. I mean, it's just all about that. When we set up Warlord, within the month, we had a very good website. We went for a big website, so it made that we were a bigger dog than we really were. We had one box set, and that's it. But we had to try and bark louder than everybody else and pretend we were big. But after a month, I decided that pretty much every wargamer, existing historical wargamer in the world, would very quickly know who you are. And that's it, because there are only a finite amount of wargamers. And we put a plastic Roman on the front of Wargames Illustrated magazine. So we put that out into the world. So by covering that magazine, which is the bestseller, and a good website, we knew that every wargamer in the world would say, that's Warlord Games. I either like them or I don't. And that's fine. Yeah, there's lots who don't like our style, and that's okay. Ours is all about action that we decided to go for. If we make a standard bearer model, well, he is going to be fighting. He's not going to stand there with a pole, which some people do that, and that's what they like, all their models just standing ranked up. I think that's a bit dull, personally, so we always make ours very exciting. And our idea was it's where Airfix touches Games Workshop, is where we decided we wanted to be. That's our style. And so we knew that very quickly we'd be well known for what we do. And after that, it was finding people from the fantasy and science fiction community who would see this stuff and say, that's cool, I rather like that. Oh, I know about Tiger tanks, I know what a Sherman tank is. I normally play fantasy or science fiction, but I think I'm going to dabble in that. How do I get into it? So it's trying to make historical gaming available to everybody, to make it easy so people can come in, put down whatever they normally do and have a break and play sophisticated games, but they're easy to get into. And that's the sort of people we're looking for, people to come into that community.
It always fascinates me how many people jump from 40k to bolt action.
Yeah, it's the life cycle of the game.
It's a real interesting thing, yeah.
It's been a phenomenon for ages, because Games Workshop used to have a historical range, and it was the same thing. Like the demographic, there would be a demographic shift from Warhammer 40k, which Lord of the Rings was Games Workshop's magnum opus genius moment, because there were rumours that they were on the ropes before that. And then Peter Jackson came along. He was a massive nerd. He is a massive nerd, massive gamer. He even has World War I biplanes in his back garden. So this dude came along and was like, "Hey, we've got something special with Lord of the Rings." Lord of the Rings is the first hit, because for £12 you could get 24 orcs, Morio goblins. The Fellowship of the Ring set was fantastically well costed. So suddenly you're in, right? So out of a class of 30, 15 are buying that set. And then Warhammer 40k, hey, these 7-foot superhuman, neo-fascist Catholic monsters killing people, they're fucking cool. You know what I mean? So then after 15, 10 go and buy Space Marines, they're pretty cool. Wait a minute, I could have a zombie dragon and cast all these spells, Warhammer Fantasy, boom, 5 go to Warhammer Fantasy. And then what happens is people get older, people have kids, people have jobs, nerds rule the earth now. This is the big thing. And this is the reason John's made a lot of money and we're making a lot of money, and anyone in board games is going to make a lot of money, is because it used to go from nerds being kicked the shit out and put into bins to being like, hey, like Bill Gates, right? One of the richest men on the planet. He's a massive nerd. And the thing is, now you've got that life cycle of 40k fantasy into historical. Warlord is now seeing people come in from all stages of life, because that system has now been broken up and changed. And it's the same with board games. Board games were not cool 20 years ago.
No. I didn't tell anyone at school I played Warhammer, ever.
Pain of
Never
death.
mentioned that. And then
it's a safe place now, Paul. You
safe
can talk
place
about
to stay. And that was, like I said, I I literally saw the birth of the first edition, and I collected second edition Warhammer. So it's kind of quite early on. It's like early 91, 92 kind of time. And so being a 10-year-old, never, no way am I going to mention in front of anyone I play this. And now it's like the coolest thing to be. Like people literally come up to you and go, yeah, I want it. What do you do for a living? My favorite thing in the world. Freaking A. Oh man, I want to do that too. But yeah, it's nice that it's kind of changed round. It's become this thing. Because people are now open to it. And you see pop culture, you go on Netflix, and it's all anime. People want that. People want fantasy. And what are the biggest selling films of all time? It's like Lord of the Rings, then superheroes again. You know, people love fantasy. It's cool, right?
Well, there was a time up until they made Lord of the Rings where fantasy films were also derided, weren't they? And then it sort of changed the way that the industry looks at fantasy, particularly. So, yeah, I think that kind of leads on nicely to my next thing that I was going to get us to talk about, and that's the idea of nostalgia a little bit, because I think that is driving the industry in lots of different ways. You know, for somebody like John and Warlord, I guess there is nostalgia for history that's driving that. You know, you're the idea of somebody that likes original style wargaming, but in a new style format, I suppose, for what John does. Do you think nostalgia drives things, John?
Well, nostalgia's not all it used to be. But what is interesting is... I'm intrigued that World War II is still such a popular subject. It's, I think it might well be videos like Band of Brothers and Call of Duty and all that. As my 11-year-old nephew pointed out, because I have a few deactivated guns at home, and he was able to point at them and tell me exactly how big the magazine capacity was on all these obscure guns. I said, well, how on earth do you know that? You're 10 or 11. Yeah. And it was all Call of Duty, so he knew which was the best gun and everything else. So World War II was huge in the as sort of for a modelling thing in the 1960s and 70s because of our dads were all, or granddads were all in the Second World War. Then in the 80s and 90s, it's kind of went out of fashion a bit, and airfix disappeared, and
fall of the Berlin Wall. It was geopolitical, right?
Nobody really cared about World War II, and now it's back. And the Nazis are just the uber fantastic baddies that keep on giving. Yeah. You know, for computer games, they're just you can't make them up. They're so horrible. You can't make them up. So it's fantastic baddie to have.
Yeah,
I think on nostalgia and like the proof of the pudding is go and look at fashion. Fashion's a huge industry, obviously, like trillions of dollars in fashion, and every few years, a previous decade comes soaring back into fashion, and people are now dressing 80s, and they're starting to dress 90s again, and soon we'll be in the 2030s dressing like the 2000s.
I'm going to be on trend at some point.
Yeah, it's beyond like this industry. It's biologically. Like it's because you remember when you were a kid, you didn't pay taxes, no one had died in your family, and it's just that on a loop, right?
It's great. One of our friends, he's a board game designer in Sheffield, and he said something to me. We're out in a pub, and he was like, he's come up with a theory called the 80s loop. And it's basically pop culture kind of came back in the 60s. So as a kid, if you were brought up then, you design stuff like the Star Wars, right? But then as a kid in the 80s, you see Star Wars and you design Warhammer. And you see Warhammer and it's just this loop. It's stuck in this, it's a beautiful loop, but it keeps refining. You look at Stranger Things. Who's Stranger Things aimed at? It's a really interesting question, because it's like, is it aimed at the parents with the kids, or is it the kids thinking that they know what the 80s is? It's like, well, that's a really interesting, and so it's like a nostalgia culture of 20 or so years that keeps cyclicating, but like it refines and changes, but relevant within its same circle.
Super relevant to your students, like super relevant is, especially the artists listening, is if you want to be big and make a lot of money in this industry, this is just a bet. So don't take me don't call me out on this. I would go and learn what art styles were kind of cool. Like, you look at what period we're living in now. We're going from 80s to 90s transition, I think. So look at the art styles that were popular then, and look at their updated versions when it comes to art theory, and try and replicate those, because art is also cyclical and art comes round again. So if you can have the skills to do an art style that's coming round on that big turning wheel to be cool again, like you will go into that feet first, like flying. So I don't know if that's a sound bet to make.
No, I think that's really interesting because we've had that with Escape the Dark Castle recently.
Correct,
haven't we? Thomas's game was fantastic, and it really latched into that early
Fighting
Citadel
fantasy.
sort of art style, the black and white sort of ink drawing style, and he's done a sci-fi variant of it now as well, hasn't he? So yeah, it's totally relevant. Yeah, so maybe that's what we need to be looking back to.
Yeah.
Those early days of Games Workshop.
Hero
again.
Quest
Yeah.
came out
Yeah.
with a new brand, new art style, but it's the same. It's just updated, and that came out in 89, 90. So 90, it's literally you can start to see what things are really cool now. So video games of the
90s.
mid 90s is coming, right?
No, if you're into board games, I can give you an example of 90s being back into fashion in a big way. So 90s, Nirvana, MTV, grunge, acid wash, that kind of. And then you've got Mind MGMT, or Mind Management, as the game's called. It's a board game. Go and check out Mind Management. It's spelled Mind MGMT, and look at the art style. And that art style is very early 90s, and it looks fantastic, and it's back. So that would be kind of the proof, I guess.
And is this, do we think, I suppose this is connected to how people become affluent at certain points in life? Because I know music has a similar trends in there, and I think it's the people that have got jobs later on in life and then have got disposable income and then they're going to buy things. I know certainly my experience in the games industry was that you would see kids coming in, and then later on those kids would grow up and have kids and then bring their kids in. I'm guessing that's something that John's seen probably at Warlord over the years. So you starting out, is that the kind of thing that you're hoping for? Do you want longevity in your games like that, or?
We've been told Senjutsu is potentially evergreen, so the idea that it has a really unique system that can then be reskinned. So we were looking at, obviously, the samurai zeitgeist. The game, I mean, it's kind of like, we can't believe it did so well, but there was a point where we were betting on samurai. We were looking at like, well, there's a TV series, there's this happening, and you kind of go, well, you start to see this wave, and we jumped on it, and now there was 5 or 6 samurai games that came out in the same month, and you're like, we kind of hit that. So we're looking at the next thing, so it's like reskinning this particular mechanic for what's going to be cool in the next 5-10 years is definitely something we'll look at, yeah.
I think as well the industry is moving really, really fast. So it's kind of like a fool's errand to go, in 10 years we're going to be doing exactly the same thing. The life cycle of the modern board gamer has not been as established as the life cycle of, I'd say, the war gamer. And because of that, we leave our options open. So both massively into video games. If we create an IP that does X well, we might make the decision to go, hey, do you know what, let's take a punt and try and make a video game out of this. We might see other mediums come back. It's almost like it's impossible to call, and I think that's where we have an advantage, because we're very young, like relatively, to people who normally own companies, and I think that's just a fact. I'm hoping because of that, we have and we've got a small company, obviously 6 employees. If you take John's, for example, at 105, the ability to change on a moment's notice is very much in our court. Like Warlord, I imagine they know what they're doing in 3 years' time. We can just say, hey, staff, like what we're doing, drop it. Like in a month, we're going to be doing this. And we can make that change. And I don't know if in 10 years we might have 105 employees as well and not be able to make that change. So while we are small and we have that very organic like growth, we're going to try and be able to do that, really.
Was it like that for Warlord at the start, John, for you? Or was it always sort of a 3-year plan, sort of 5-year plan type situation?
We do plan 3 years ahead. So we've got our products for the next 3 years already squared away. When we set up, though, the flexibility of 2 or 3 of us was a joy, because we could do whatever we liked. As you get bigger, you do become more inflexible, and being small but perfectly formed is a huge advantage. It really is. It takes quite a while to change things at Warlord. Sometimes too long, certainly too long for my liking. But yeah, having a few of you making quick decisions makes you very agile, keeps you honest, and it's a very good. You can one can get blinded by having larger turnover and all that sort of thing. You think this is very great and it's all jolly good, isn't it? Yeah. Well, not necessarily.
The Star Wars franchise, I think, is a fantastic example of, and Disney in general is now a gigantic monolith beast that that produced Force Awakens was the first one of the new trilogies, and it was a disaster. And they then hired a load of bots and reviewers to put out fantastic reviews because, unfortunately for them, they'd already done the third film. Like, it had pretty much been laid out, and they couldn't divert that. They basically had a train car going down a hill.
Just too big to
they're
control.
Too big.
Yeah.
And I take John's point. I'm fantastically grateful for the ability to have that decision tree. I think its decision trees is kind of the mechanical way of seeing how their companies work. John's decision tree is like John has like managers, sub-managers, staff, and all the way down the line. It's Paul and I and then 4 others. So our decision tree is only 2 stratas. I mean, me and Paul go off to a pub or a cafe and have a chat about what we think is the best decision. But then when we come to the office, it's literally just, hey, 4 staff, like, here's our decision. So.
Do you think, John, that it's less fun when you become successful? Is that the curse of success in a way?
Yes, I think it probably is. I still have fun, but not as much as I used to have.
Yeah.
Setting it up, there was a thrill to just being 2 or 3 of you. There's no doubt about that. Generally, on decision making, I would suggest as a boss that you listen to everybody but decide alone, is what I would say. You're the boss, and you've got to make the decisions. And sometimes it's not going to please everybody. Well, most of the times it won't please everybody, but that's why you're the boss, and you're backing your decisions. And sometimes you do just have to say, this is what we're going to do. Thank you for all your contributions. And then they'll say, you don't understand. I say, no, I do understand. I just disagree. So I like people to speak up and speak up well. And but once the decision's made, you got to go that way. Everybody behind, this is the way we're going. No dissent, no moaning, no muttering around the water cooler or whatever. It's shut up and get on with it.
And ultimately, you're going to take responsibility for the decision as well as the boss, aren't you? And I think that's the key thing. If it does go wrong,
my responsibility.
You'll be responsible. Yeah.
That's probably like the defining feature of an entrepreneur, I reckon. Like if you go and become an artist at another company, there is a chance, however small, depending on the company, to blame someone else in that work queue. I think one of the key defining things that, if I was to write a dictionary for entrepreneur, would be the buck stops at the buck stops at you. Like Paul and I, if everything goes wrong, it's our fault. If everything goes wrong for Warlord, ultimately John has got to shoulder that responsibility.
Yeah, and then I suppose the bigger the company gets, the more responsibility there is, because you're actually responsible for other people at that point, aren't you?
Well, I do. I mean, the way I look at it is, I look at I'm responsible for 104 mortgages or rents and everything else, and it is a big responsibility as a boss, and with it comes real responsibility, folks. Very sobering at times, and the last 2 years has been very tricksy in running a business with a factory and trying to keep everybody safe. We had to change quite a lot of things, and people didn't like change. I could see that, but I just say, well, the alternative is we all don't have jobs, and which would you rather have? A double shift where we had to, so we could spread people out.
I've got a really interesting question, and it's not personal, but you do have to answer it, obviously. When COVID became a thing, besides like personal health and everything, were you scared for the business?
Oh yeah, yes, I was, because having 105 people in one big building, first thing we did was we just shut for a week, because I just didn't know what was going on, and nor did many other people. So we said, right, everybody just go home, and let's think about what we're going to do. And we had to make up some pretty serious, what if it all goes wrong? What if we can't come in? What if the government says you can't go to work? And then one of the ministers, I can't remember his name, it doesn't really matter, but he said, stay in business. We don't want everybody not working, but make it as safe as you can. And so my wonderful factory manager put all these things into place, and we haven't had any work COVID at all, which has been fantastic because of the things they did. But yeah, it was a real, oh dear, we might have to close the doors because we can't make anything.
And it obviously ended being a massive victory because it kind of obvious now looking back on it, but as a wargamer, I had like 11 armies that I would, also take to tournaments, never got a chance to paint them, and then suddenly all the gaming time had gone because I couldn't see anyone. So everyone sat down and painted. And I know Games Workshop, because the way they trade, like I know that they sold a lot of stuff because people go, hang on, I've now painted my backlog and I have to buy more just because of the way the industry works. So I imagine you then, it's a very welcome surprise to have that kind of effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I mean, dreadful though it was, there's always good in bad things, and everybody finished all their armies off and kept coming back for more paint and glues and brushes and a new army.
All the hobby stuff would have gone through the roof.
Yeah,
it
did. So that was a benefit in the end for us. But it was a horrid week when that first came, closing the factory for a week. Didn't like that.
No. So just sort of, I'm conscious of time, and we probably this might be the last bit that we talk about before we go to Q&A. So start thinking of your questions, folks. I'm also interested in within the idea of entrepreneurism. It kind of ties into what we've just been talking about as well, and responsibility. The idea of opportunity. I know, John, you're very big on giving people opportunities. When I was an 18-year-old, not dissimilar to you people sat in the audience, John gave me a job at Games Workshop. I was just a spotty oik from Lincolnshire, and sat in Brian Ansell's office being wowed by all these Gaelic games on shelves at Games Workshop, and John basically said, yeah, come and work for us. We didn't know what I was going to do. He just put me into lots of different things to see whether I liked it or not, and I ended up in retail and had a fantastic time, apart from when a lorry ran over the table tennis tables at Hull, which I don't know if you remember that. No. We used to have table tennis tables for gaming tables back then. It was all quite Heath Robinson at Games Workshop. And I sprayed mine black outside and left it to dry. And what I didn't realise was one of the other shops around the back had a massive delivery, so an articulated lorry ran over this very expensive table tennis table that I'd sprayed black. I wasn't in the good books for that one. Anyway, my point being, before I go off on a complete tangent, how important is it for you as companies to give opportunities to the local area, to Nottingham particularly? I think that's very relevant for the students.
There you go.
You go first.
Oh, yes, thanks. I really, kind of with Confetti, with the Industry Week stuff, obviously I keep coming back, obviously teaching here. It seems to be, one thing I found, it was really nice yesterday to do the Industry Week. I mean, with lockdown and COVID, we set up our company and no one knew who we were because we'd never been out of our house. All the expos are closed. Even the small ones, there was like a Robin Hood one that was closed. So we couldn't do anything. So we yesterday is like the second time we've been out to show off our stuff. And seeing people playing our things, and obviously all positive.
It was an affirmation, yeah.
But it's nice to kind of have that connection. I mean, one thing you mentioned earlier about community, James is absolutely incredible on the Kickstarter. We actually, I think we broke a record. We need to find out if it's true or not. We had the most engagement on any Kickstarter that's ever happened. It was something like 3 out of 4 people commented, which has never happened before. I don't like that. For some reason, when the phone goes, I don't answer it. I don't like talking to people, but I like speaking to people in real. So getting out there and talking to the community and kind of playing with the students.
I answered every comment on the Kickstarter campaign for the first, nearly, I think it was almost the whole run. I think I was getting about 2 to 3 hours.
We had 12,000 comments
28 days.
as a company with 2 employees.
Now
just us 2.
27,000 comments, I think, on the Kickstarter campaign, and I think that. I mean, you can argue about is that parasocialism, like the idea of knowing people you've never really met, but it's wonderful because man is not an island. You might think your art is good, but we're herd creatures. We love being told, Yeah. So yesterday, I think Paul's overall point is people got to play my games, the kind of thing.
We've employed someone who's ran Protospiel. And before lockdown happened, there's this beautiful guy called Chris, Dr. Chris, who ran a game event for games designers to come down, amateur games designers, amateur playtesters to play people's games.
Local, too.
And local, in Nottingham. So we met him there 3 years ago. We've employed him now, but so we're starting this thing back up. So we want this arm of our company to be kind of connected to local gamers. Because obviously in Nottingham, there's a lot of talent here. Yeah. And it's obviously beneficial for us to see that, because then we can obviously employ that as well. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting that because we've got so many developers, there are these great community things like the group that James and Sophie set up. I know they're not running it anymore, but that's really useful for networking opportunities. And as are the shows, like we had Hammerheads, was it 2 weeks ago in Newark, I think? Yeah, that's a really great show. We got Partisan, that's a well-established show in Newark as well. It's great for networking. So, yeah. John, over to you. How do you think about the opportunity thing?
Well, I just, talking to you guys on video and here, I think you're beautifully placed to join any of these exciting game companies, whether you're an artist, graphic artist, a writer, whatever you are, sculptor. Nottingham's the place. I mean, there is nowhere better. Little sleepy Nottingham. Who would have thunk it? You're not going to Los Angeles. You're not going to London. You're going to Nottingham, and that's where it all happens.
Totally, yeah, really great. Okay, so we go over to some Q&As. Have we got any questions on the digital yet? So, have we got any in the room as well? Anybody got one in the room? We'll just do in the room first. Yep, we got one down the front there, Kev.
How long exactly has Warlord Games been around for? Because my dad used to work there.
Did he?
Yeah, his name was Daryl Ballum.
Oh right, yeah. 14 years.
He used to work there, and I think I don't know if Warlord Games has moved anywhere, because back in 2010, when I was in primary school, he used to take me to this old workhouse place, and I used to just kind of be there, because when I was at the age where I wasn't allowed to be left alone in the house.
Yeah, no, we've been going for 14 years now, so we just moved into our new premises.
Yeah.
Well, a year ago.
My dad, he has his own kind of little business now where he works in the shed, and he kind of just makes molds and stuff.
I remember him well.
Yeah.
Your dad's the lifeblooded industry, though.
He made my first game. We know him really well. Yeah, I just recognise you. Yeah.
That 90% of the industry is men working from their sheds, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful because it doesn't exist in music. To record an album now that gets on Spotify, you have to go to a huge £1 million studio and get it through. The fact that your dad can do that and run that as a business is such a beautiful thing about our industry.
I sometimes go out into his shed and I see all the kind of stuff he has, and it's really it's made me think what I would want to do in the future. I'm obviously more of just an artist, drawing pen and paper, but I would love to do actual model stuff.
Be an artisan.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that anyone can do it as well. You don't need to have vast amounts of money. You just need to have a little bit of talent. And if you set your sights on a small business and sort of have constraints so that you keep doing that, and you're happy, you're not earning masses of money, but you're earning enough to keep going. That's all you need to do. I think that's one of the problems with business, and I think this does tie in with the entrepreneurial thing. There's always this thing to kind of grow. But actually, sometimes businesses reach an optimum level, and you don't need to grow it any further. Like John said, it becomes less fun when it grows too big. So the art is keeping it at the level where you're earning enough and your people are earning enough, but you don't necessarily want to push it too far. And that actually is the downfall of a lot of businesses. They try and push too far too quickly and consequently aren't a success. Cool. Have we got any more questions in the room? Okay, so Kev, if you just pop to the back, the online questions will be on the screen there. If you choose some of those, I don't know how many there are. Oh, Becky's got one. Of course you can. Yeah. No pressure.
Can we come to the front first and get that one done? Was that a question?
No, it's okay. You're all right. It was a question, but not a question, if that makes sense.
Where's the question? Okay, I've got one here then. Basically, it's anonymous, so I can't say the student's name. As someone who wants to start my own table game business, what would you say are the best starting tips or resources?
I've got the biggest one, and the first thing you should always do is work out what you're good at and work out what you're not good at, and you'll be able to find someone on your course who you get on with who can help you fill the gaps in what you're not very good at, and what they don't have will be complemented by what you do have. I don't do it alone, I think, is a great example. I think we've both seen that. You need someone to support you when times are rough. You need someone to share in your success when you're doing well. And also, very few people in life can push themselves as hard as they need to, but it's very easy to have a friend or a co-worker who can push you to new heights, and they can push you to new heights. So I'd say number one is do an evaluation on who on your course can do what you can't do, and go to them with a proposal and say, like, let's do this. And you haven't got much to lose when you're very young.
I'd absolutely endorse what this man says. And then secondly, get a good accountant.
Do you think that helped you, not the accountant thing, obviously that did help, we know that helps, but when you set up Warlord, that it was with Paul, because Paul was definitely a big factor in the setting up of the business?
Yeah, it was, Paul's my product man and go-to man, and without him it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Cool, do we have any more? That's it, Brill. Okay, Becky, have you got one? Oh. No. Doesn't matter. Okay. Ollie's got one. Yeah.
Thanks, Kev. Yeah, apologise. Now, I'm not big into tabletop gaming, but it's always really interested me if a group of friends or whatever have got a great idea for a game, how do they go about getting it prototyped? And are there any things they can look at with their models to make them more cost-effective for sort of mass production?
I'll do the first part. I mean, for the mass production, you guys could probably handle that better than I can. The best thing about tabletop games is you can make it in a pub with a pen. You can grab a beer mat and draw it out, and that is pretty much what it's going to be like. The ideas, like I said, 10 to a penny, everyone's got them. I can't emphasize enough the idea of just making something and playing it through. You can mind palace a game forever and go, oh, it's the greatest thing in the world. And as soon as you start drawing it and putting it together, like, well, that doesn't work. Yeah. Just draw it, make it physically, bring it to a bar, pub, cafe, play it, and you'll see things. And then you'll be like, oh, that £3,000 miniature I want there, actually, we don't need that anymore. That actually doesn't do anything to the game. So again, but if they are essential, then obviously Nottingham's a great place to kind of get those kind of miniatures made. But yeah, first things first is just make the game with pens and paper. It's literally Blue Peter job, the whole thing. There's also, every game we've made, the £1 million game was made with pens and paper originally. Yeah.
There's also fantastic online communities out there. There's the Break My Game community, which are fantastic, and they will play anything and tell you what's great about it and what's bad about it. On Facebook, the best one is the Board Game Design Lab. The Facebook group. There's about 10,000 people in there. Mostly they're in the industry or they're trying to break into the industry. And you can do tit-for-tat time very easily. So if you've got a game idea, go and test someone else's idea for an hour, and they'll test your game idea for an hour. And that's another thing this industry has going for it.
Yep, I'd agree with all of that. You just use proxy miniatures and things like that is what a lot of people do. But then if you're very serious about it, just to help these student guys here, is if you do want a range of figures commissioned, if you did decide to, you could probably get some average miniatures made. I wouldn't say that they'd be the best in the world for £100 each, £120 for a master figure. And from there, you obviously make production molds from there. But yeah, about £120 to make a model elf, say, or a stormtrooper or whatever it's going to be. But you can pay up to £400 or £500 easily with one of the better sculptors. But again, most of them to be found around Nottingham. And then you could just get them, we actually do a service for it, but quite a few people will cast them up for you. You'll find somebody who can cast them. But that's what you'd be talking about, £120 and probably £60, £70 for a master mould to make them. So not out of everybody's pocket, and you soon get that money back.
Yeah, I suppose as well, the thing that's changed recently in terms of prototyping is the advent of 3D printing as well, isn't it? That's made it much easier to get your initial prototypes.
I would go beyond that as well, and I'll give you the best 15 quid you'll ever spend if you haven't got Tabletop Simulator on Steam, go and buy it literally now. Like, leave this call, ditch it, run, and buy Tabletop Simulator, and you'll be able to scan in JPEG, scan in Word documents, scan in all of your stuff, and make your game in a simulated 3D environment, and you'll know very quickly whether it's broken or not, or whether there's an idea there, and you don't even have to go and pay for sculpts yet. You can just use cubes or whatever until you know at least there's something there. Because what you don't want to do is do what we did. Well, it's my mistake. What you don't want to do is go and spend like $2-3 grand on a load of art that you then can't fit onto a product, because that. And I had to do. Paul warned me, and I had to make that mistake. To learn from it. Like, you know, we all have kind of vices. Go and get 15 quid, Tabletop Simulator on Steam. You can make your own game on there, and you can do whatever you want with it and change it. And then from there, you can look at, do I spend money on this? Do I spend inheritance? Do I borrow money? How do I raise funds? That decision doesn't have to come at this stage.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think you've got something to show to people then as well, so you can show it to potential investors
across the world.
At that point, yeah. So it's really helpful. Great thing. Oh, Kev, you got one? Yep.
I've got one question here from Victoria. Any work-life balance tips? I'm a student who wants to start a small business, and I have a hard time thinking on both and enjoying life to a satisfactory level. And from what I've heard, you guys have work-life balance figured out.
If you consider, like, if you're not enjoying work, then that's a problem. That's the life balance.
Yeah.
We work all the time, but we don't think it as the classic work.
I used to play video games like an hour a day. Used to watch like Frasier and Seinfeld and Star Trek and stuff, like a lot. And then as I've taken up on this business, I just don't stop. Now that does annoy partners a lot. Not when they see the check at the end of it, but like entrepreneurs, we don't talk about it. It's dirty because it's a dirty kind of like a part of the industry. There is no work-life balance if you're an entrepreneur. Like, you have to live and breathe what you're going to do, or you're not going to be a success. If you want to work for yourself, if you want to have a stable job within the industry, you can do that with a work-life balance. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to make a lot of money and be successful, like the work-life balance thing is kind of something that, you know, you have to look at sacrificing, because this is a hustle that you have to work. Like, early days, like now John's like settling back, you know, but imagine his early days. He was probably eating his cereal in the morning and thinking about the hustle. He was coming back from work and going like, who do I need to ring in the morning to sort this out? I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to play board game reviewers. On my birthday, was it 4 a.m.? Was it earlier than that?
Yeah, you were actually at our house, and it was your birthday. We'd gone to bed, and you were still playing a reviewer. Yeah, that's how intense. So you skipped a birthday. Apparently, you can have another one. You said.
Yeah, you can always have more. You can always have more birthdays. Yeah.
It's a sore point with me, that one.
You're 11 now, right?
Yeah, I only get one every 4 years. John, have you got anything on the work-life balance?
And it's a great question. That's a really good question. When you are running your own company, if that's what you want to do, you do never switch off. You're constantly looking at things, and it might not actually be about gaming. You might be seeing the wonderful waitress who served you, thinking, she's bloody good. I'd employ her. You think, you know, for attitude, or you know, or if you're going, or you're constantly thinking about your job, and then of course with the different time zones, then America kicks on 4 hours later, so you're then on the phone to America and things like that, and so it doesn't really ever. You never entirely switch off, that's for sure. Stealing ideas from other companies, always good. Always keep an eye out for that. Inspired by, yeah. So I still read a few business books. They're normally overly long, of course, and could be summarized in 10 pages. But you could do a lot worse than read some business books. Find the best ones, read them quickly, just get through to what the message is, and try and put that into your workplace. Somebody who's already solved all the problems in the world. You just got to find them.
And I guess as well, when you're in the games industry, it's good to play games every now and then. So, which I know you all do.
Yeah, we do.
I think sadly you play fewer and fewer.
Yeah. We try to get this kind of culture of Wednesdays we'll play games. Yeah, everyone's like, yeah, it'd be cool. I think we've done it once, because it's like, actually, no, we've got stuff to do, which is actually fun. I need to design this card. It is doing. I can't just stop and play brass. I can't do that. So yeah.
Cool. Have we got any more questions? I think we're done. Brilliant. Unless no. Oh, Becky's got one at the front. Yeah. Excellent. Where's Kev with the mic?
I don't like talking in a microphone. But, do you have any advice for people who are, say, graduating this year and want to get into the art or the sculpting for tabletop games?
Loads. So first thing, you need an Instagram and you need an ArtStation, like absolutely, because it just shows off your work. You need to be doing it every day. Like in reality, like if you want to work in this industry as an artist and be successful, you have to love what you do, and people who love what they do will do it every day. So if you're not doing it every day, look at the reasons why, and ask yourself, am I willing to work that hard? That's like a savage thing, but it's totally true. Don't be scared of working for free at the start, but quickly learn your value, if that makes sense. So if there's a company out there and they've got a good social media presence, they've got like 5,000 follows or whatever, and they're doing a new project, just do a piece of art that corresponds to that project and send it to them. And it might not open any doors for you at that moment, but it might say, like later on, when they go home, they'll be like, hey, did you see this piece of art we got sent in? Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, we can't use it at the moment, but I know a company that can, and suddenly your details are being passed around. And it really is that simple. It's perseverance and hard work. You don't have to be the best in the world, and don't feel like an imposter. Like, you know what I mean? Like the Sistine Chapel wasn't painted in a day, so you'll get there, but you've just got to work at it repeatedly.
My old boss, Brian Ansell, who set up Citadel Miniatures and then ran Games Workshop, was always of the opinion that if you wanted to be a sculptor, he always said that anybody could sculpt, which I was never quite sure of, but he assured me that was the case. But he said, make 12 models and put them all in the bin because they'll be terrible, and your 13th will be excellent. So perseverance, that's what he said, and he's quite a clever man.
He did all right, didn't he?
Yeah, not bad.
And that's the power of iteration as well, which is something that we're always teaching on the games art courses particularly. So that's great. The other thing that I would add is do some research as well. You know, if you're going to be applying for a position at Warlord or a Stone Sword, see what they've done before. Maybe create some artwork or some sculpting that ties in with their ethos. You know, do some
if it's
research.
relevant, relevant, there's we're 100 times more likely to look at it. You know, because as Paul has said earlier, like we're in this workflow, we're in this zone. Like, so if we're seeing something that corresponds to our work, it's got our attention. If it's something that we deem irrelevant, like harsh, but we probably won't even have time to look at it. But you don't have to apply it to our company. You can go and look at so many other companies that'd be the same kind of system.
Yeah, the reverse psychology of that is if you're doing something and you're really good at doing something, find companies that are doing that
Correct,
as well.
yeah.
So and approach them. Yeah. Brill. Okay, well, thank you very much to our guests for taking part in the panel today. Thanks to John, Paul and James. If you do have any other questions and you suddenly think of them after the session, do feel free to email me on my Confetti email and I'll pass them on to the guys to answer. But a virtual round of applause is silent, probably happening over there. I'm sure there'll be people typing the word clap numerous times, but I'm sure we can get some applause in the room as well. Fantastic. We know